Back to the show, gang. Guys, have I got a treat for you? Do you know what DMT is? Dimethyltryptamine. Do you know what the hallucinogenic drink is? Ayahuasca. If you've heard of those two things and you know what they're about, this video is going to change your life and blow your mind. That's what she said. This video is an interview with a guy called Dan. It's a great name. And he is from America, and he's a DMT scientist. He doesn't call himself that, but I'm going to call him that because he is. He's a DMT enthusiast, and he has discovered something specific with DMT. Now, this podcast goes into the specifics, but to give you a brief highlight, essentially, he found that with a projector, a laser projector, you know, one of those things that go on the wall that print off a screen, with nothing on it, just the laser light printing on the wall or surface, whilst under the influence of DMT, you can see the code of reality. I know it sounds mental. I know, real life Matrix shit. Okay. With this laser, imagine the Matrix, but instead of the green falling icons, they're red icons and they rotate around an axis, but legitimate real life code within the reality. You can see this when under the influence of DMT, looking through this laser. More specifically, if there are multiple people in the room taking DMT and looking through the same projection, they see the same thing. It's not a unique thing. It's actually presented there where the light is shining. And if you move the light around, you see different code depending on where the light is shining. I know it sounds crazy. Dan goes into all the specifics and we cover it right here. This is a 2-hour podcast. I'm going to split it into a part 1 and part 2. You're going to love it. Check it out.
So the claim is, if you project a 650 nanometer diffracted laser on a wall, and the diffraction pattern has to be wide enough because what you want to be doing is looking through it. It's almost like you're looking beyond it, not at where it hits the wall.
Yep.
And you smoke DMT, you will see straight up code running in the wall. And
so running down like the Matrix?
No, it has rotational patterns. It clumps into regions. So there's like a whole array of things that are happening with it.
Okay.
I don't necessarily want to expose too much what they are because we are going to do double-blind studies at this point.
Okay.
And to say we see code, that's cool. That's actually not a problem. But to say the specifics of what we see, I want to reserve this because I want also science to be able to like grab something here. But there are very particular structures in there that we can agree on.
Wow.
It creates forms. It creates like a matrix of like different forms, which again we can agree on. But the thing that makes up this whole thing are characters very similar. They literally look like Japanese katakana.
Just to explain to people that aren't familiar with the video that I saw of you, the claim here that you're putting forward that you've replicated 146 times with other people is that there's a particular laser at a certain frequency that when you look through it, when it's projected on the wall like a projector laser, when you look at that light in that frequency, you see something whilst on DMT. And what you're seeing, other people see the same thing in the same room if they smoke DMT.
You can even point to things just like you can point to furniture in the room. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's the thing that that's the thing that separates this from other claims by people on psychedelics, even if those claims sound similar. So like people talk about similar entities, things like that. That's actually my conversation right after you is with Chris Timmerman, with the guy who's leading the research in Imperial College in London. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go on, mate. My mind, I've got so many questions. I keep interrupting you. Sorry,
no, that's okay. So their focus at the moment is on the entities. They want to map as many entities as possible. They send people that they obviously psychologically vet, and then they're healthy psychologically, critical thinkers, and then they send them all in, and they can keep you there indefinitely because they do it intravenously. And then
the University of Psychedelics in London, right?
The Imperial College in London.
Imperial College, forgive me. Yeah. I think I saw a paper referring it to the University of Psychedelics, but essentially,
I don't even know about that. But yeah,
this is where they are intravenously dripping DMT in a controlled dosage through your bloodstream, so you can stay in that state for 3, 4, 6 hours. Is that right?
Yes. So the formula to actually keep, because it wasn't actually that simple.
Similar, but back in the early 2000s, there was a what's the word I'm looking for? A newspaper magazine that went viral before the internet, which was called Magic Eye. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
you would
Exactly.
exactly like that. So once
You
you see
nailed
it,
it.
you see it.
You nailed it.
Got
So
it.
some people can't see the magic eye, but something is there, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
maybe you absolutely nailed it. That's exactly what it is.
Got
And
it.
even the gesture you have to do with your attention, kind of like almost like go a little cross-eyed like that.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
almost the same, right?
Interesting.
Exactly. You look beyond it. I always say it's like looking through the window versus looking at the window.
I told you, mental. Those were some highlights. Sit back, put the kettle on, watch this. Is an hour part one, and then tomorrow there'll be a part two. Enjoy. You're in for a good ride. Let me tell you what I know of you, first of all. So I saw a TikTok video. I think it was the one that has done the viral rounds when you're talking about the laser, you're talking about what you saw in the light, etc. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, fuck me, I've got to talk to this guy, because I've got this real thirst for wanting to know more about what this life is about. You know, why the fuck are we here? What is the point? This can't all be random. It feels like there's something more. It feels like this is part of a bigger thing. And I just don't know what the answers to those questions are. I then was introduced to mushrooms when I was 27. Had a couple of really, really profound, great experiences with mushrooms. That then led me to try LSD. Had a couple of good experiences with LSD. And then a friend of mine said, you should try DMT. I was like, well, what the fuck is DMT? And he goes, it's iron ashqua. It's the synthetic version. And I was like, okay, I knew a little bit about iron ashqua, the toad and the tea and all that jazz. I watched a few documentaries on it. And then about 2 years ago, I tried it for the first time with a friend of mine who'd done it many times. So I felt like I was in a really safe environment. Then had this, well, as you know, my mind just fucking exploded with what I was presented with. Had a really profound emotional reaction towards the end of the trip. That certainly fucking helped me. There's no denying it. I won't bore you with it too much, but the vision I had was, I think, me in the cot as a baby, in the baby's crib, looking up and seeing these 7 or 8 shadow entities all looking down on me, and all I could feel was love. And I started to cry, I started to sob, and it was really fucking, I was like, Jesus, I'm not alone. There are people who love me. I just don't know who they are yet, type thing. And then I did DMT a couple of more times after that. They weren't emotional, but they were fantastical. It was space. It was traveling through the universe. We're all one, that type of thing. Anyway, a couple of years go past. I haven't touched it since. And I'm an addict myself in recovery. So it was something I was a little bit hesitant with, is it going to be another drug I attach to, rely on, etc. But it's not that at all. Left it for a little bit, saw your video, and then I was like, oh my God, there is more to this. What is there? And then I saw your YouTube channel. I was like, oh, I've got to talk to this guy, and that's why I'm here, mate. Really, I was just like, what do you know? What have you seen? What can you tell me? And what's your perspective on the whole DMT topic? I suppose that's where I thought we'd start.
Well, thank you for that, Daniel. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing, because that's those stories are accumulating. And it's not a secret at this point that psychedelics hold some kind of a key to both our mental health and also to some kind of a deeper understanding of whatever the fuck is going on in general.
Yeah, indeed.
And this is not new. This is something that has been unraveling since pretty much, at least in the Western world, since pretty much the 60s, maybe a little bit before. But as we know, like you mentioned, ayahuasca, indigenous people have been doing this for
thousands of years.
How long, right?
Yeah.
So it's always somewhat of a conundrum as to how you approach this subject, because depending on what kind of conversation we want to have, a lot of the modern attitudes towards it is towards the medicinal side of it. So again, there's a lot of research. Johns Hopkins, well, basically there's centers all over the world, and anywhere that it becomes even somewhat legal, it immediately is utilized as this catalyst to some kind of a self, like a health, mental health. And if I have to, you know, put my guess in a broad stroke as in one sentence as to why that is I think it really helps to dissolve boundaries. It helps to dissolve the ego, the
Yeah.
perception of the self. And that is the thing that is actually healing about it, because you, like you said, you all of a sudden realize, oh, I'm not alone. There's something
It's
else.
more. Yeah.
Right. But when you encounter DMT, well, actually, that's true of other psychedelics as well. If you do enough of them, like if you do enough
Yes.
mushrooms, if you do if you do enough of anything in that sphere, it becomes apparent that, at least to me, it was immediately apparent that there's something else that is going on here, and it really depends on our ontology. So, like, if we come at this deciding that everything, just a physicalist perspective, in which we say, well, you know, uh, there's a physical world, and then there's our mind is somehow constructed from the physical world. We don't know how it is, but that's the picture, right? So when you look at it this way, then yeah, the the most logical thing you can say is like, well, this you perturb your brain this way, and then it creates hallucinations. It creates some kind of extra content. But when you look at the specifics, this picture starts breaking down, and it's a difficult subject to unpack, because it depends on It depends on one coming in contact with this experience.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean specifically is that how tangible something is in your experience is the main arbiter of how seriously you're going to take its reality to be.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about this in the new video I just released, in which, when we walk around a physical object, there's not a lot we need to do to establish that this is real,
Yeah,
because our
indeed.
frame is anything I can touch with my body is part of what I call reality. That's what it is.
And that's confirmed by other people's perspective as well. So if I hold up my phone, for example, you can see my phone, I can see my phone, you can touch my phone, I can touch my phone, and we have a shared experience of this reality.
Exactly.
And what's common with psychedelics is people have a different version of their reality, particularly with mushrooms and LSD. Well, my perception of it was I found mushrooms and LSD to connect me to nature, whereas DMT seems to connect me to the universe.
It's like the main artery, yeah.
Indeed, yeah, indeed.
I will get to the differences between the two, but I think I really want to emphasize this point for people, because I think that if we're just going to talk about the differences in psychedelics, it creates some kind of I think it still creates an illusion that I think we shouldn't have from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I want to spend maybe one more minute just on this
Please
point.
do. Yeah, please do.
Yeah. Which is that, so like we said, anything we can touch with our bodies automatically, that's real. I know that's real. But then if you look at the details, you realize, if you really think about it for a second, you say, okay, even in the physicalist perspective, we all understand that whatever we see with our eyes and feel with our body, this whatever this is, this space, that's not what reality looks like. That's obvious, right? That we understand that. It's you don't see gamma rays, you don't see X-rays. There's most of what we know exists, we don't see, right? Yeah. I'm not even talking about dark matter, which is like a whole, right? Yeah. So we understand that whatever this is some kind of a shared hallucination. It's some kind of a rendering that is happening that we share. And to the extent that we can communicate with each other and say, hey, what do you think? Do you think that's that? It's like, yeah, okay. So we have communicational bridges in which we kind of agree on things, right? And we go about our day. We don't think about it too much. But what happens is that, for example, when you do a lot of mushrooms or DMT especially, what's confounding about it is how real it feels.
Yeah.
So I always use the example, especially for people who've never done psychedelics. I say, well, imagine DMT, really imagine this moment when you wake up from a very realistic dream. And then there's these few, first minutes where you like maybe a few first seconds where you go, wait, what? Oh, right. And then you remember that this was reality. And again, you get up and move on with your day. But if you would ask yourself, what were the parameters I used to determine that now this is reality and that was the dream?
Yes.
You will find that there are very particular attributes to your experience that you are using to determine that. One of them is edge detection. So, for example, in a dream, things are more vague, they're more foggy, right? Here, things are more stable. They're like there's something, there's tangibility to it.
Predictable.
We don't necessarily have a good word for it, but it's, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, predictable.
Everybody understands.
Measurable.
Yeah. So I always say to people, well, imagine that one level up. Imagine, because usually when you smoke weed or you drink alcohol, there's always this component of less. There's some kind of a veil. You're more murky. Things are not as clear.
Yeah.
And you feel better usually because of that, because a lot of the content is just removed, right?
Yeah.
It's like you don't have to think about it.
Less noise.
Exactly. But it's but you essentially go down.
Yes.
You don't go you go down in perception, right?
Yeah. Escape.
But when you smoke DMT, I mean, obviously, if you smoke a lot, then you don't even remember that you're you or a human or anything. But yeah, but if you smoke enough, but not too much, what's weird is that you don't feel different. It's just that the world feels more.
Yes.
It's more vibrant. The edge detection goes way up, just one more, again, up, right? So it's almost like, imagine being Neo waking up in the real world and going, what?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? This is, and this is not an exaggeration. To anybody who never done psychedelics, I'm not exaggerating right now. This is what it feels like. So now, then the question becomes, how often do you have to do this? Like, how many times do you have to have this experience to say, wait a second, what is happening here?
Yeah.
Right?
So the same experience.
Like or at least the same attributes of the experience. You might land in a different place, right? Yep. But like if you go to New York City, imagine it's like a portal and it takes you like to the New York City of the multidimensional space. So you might land in a different place every time. It might not be the exact same place, but it feels the same.
Yeah.
Right. So obviously, I'm not the first one to ask himself that question of like, wait a second, is this real? So in that sense, I'm separating this type of question from the medicinal attributes of psychedelics because it's a different project, right? People were focused on like how it helps us to, which by the way, I think it's tremendously important, probably the most important thing. But that's how my brain is constructed. I was always obsessed with the biggest question. My grandfather was a physicist. He started talking to me about black holes when I was like 3 years old. It was always with me. This whenever I would, if I just sit down on the couch, I have nothing to do, my brain automatically goes to like, okay, what's outside of the universe? It's just what my brain does.
Yeah.
And
what's the universe expanding into?
It's who I am.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't want to get into like I was placed on this planet to do this or that. I don't know about any of that. All I know is that that's what my brain does.
Yeah.
And because of that, that's my nature. So when I encounter these experiences, at first, obviously, because it dissipates and it kind of goes away and it's not exactly, it does fade away after you come back. It doesn't, and maybe there's a good reason for that. It kind of protects your brain so you can function, right? Mm-hmm. But then I had a crazy, ultra realistic experience, like more realistic than even that.
Wow, okay.
That I had, the details would take me a very long time to unpack. And if anybody's interested, there's a great podcast I did on Soma. I do recommend it. It's like a great episode. It's actually not boring at all. It was well done. And
you send me the link after this.
The what? I'm sorry?
Can you send me the link to that after this?
Absolutely, yeah. And there I unpacked the story in more detail. But the gist of it is that I had an experience that was so realistic as to be equivalent to real life. It was just completely real. And at that point, I said, okay, there's no way this is made by my brain. It's not some kind of if you think of like what people think of hallucinations, it's not like, oh, those geometric patterns appeared and this stuff and like, that talk, right? It wasn't that. It was, first of all, there was a being that appeared in my room and it was as tangible as you.
Wow.
Right? So imagine that happening to you, right? So at that point I was like, no, this, and most people would probably drop it, right? Because it doesn't touch on anything that on your daily life. But to me, it was not an option. I was like, no. We got to answer this, because here's the thing. And I don't, whatever the truth is, no matter how crazy and profound it might be, either God exists or fairies or none of it. And this is, this is just coming from like the most open attitude, actually. None of it is magic. It can't be, because the definition of magic is it just happened, right?
Yeah.
It's not what it is. It can be something we don't understand, but if it touches about, if anything influences anything else in reality, it has a mechanism by which it's doing that. Always, right? Yep. Even if you want to say there's those beings that have those abilities, and when they go like this with their hand, this happens, great. But there's still a mechanism by which all of this happens, right? And even if we can't understand it at the moment, there's still a mechanism by which it happens. And I was like, okay, let's answer this. And I started getting I got obsessed with this question, and I started going into physics and like what I understand about, general principles and what we understand about physics, and what it actually means to see something and what your brain is doing when you're seeing something. So I really went like pretty deep there. And to be quite honest, it wasn't very forthcoming. I was having those experiences in DMT, and it felt very real. It was going on for like a year. And I started doing it a lot. And it wasn't like, when I tell this part of the story, people are like, oh, here it is. I'm like, no, you don't understand. It didn't influence my life. I would just, it's not like that. It was like a phone call. I'm like, all right, let's call and see what happens. But
I like that.
But nothing honestly came out of it. So it was like for a year plus. Eventually, I just straightforwardly asked them, I was like, hey guys, can you give me something tangible? Like, show me how to build a spaceship, something. Like, obviously, if this is real, right? I want to tell other people. We want to understand. We want to be a part of this. And there was nothing. Like, it was like esoteric things. And that really pointed for me like, okay, well, great. I'll come visit. No problem. It's fun. But for now, we're done. Like, I'm not. Sorry,
did you form relationships with this entity? As in, I don't mean a relationship. Did you form a conversational connection where you were asking and then receiving information?
Oh yeah. They would teach me things. They would literally teach me things, and we would pick up from where we left off.
Wow.
So, yeah. It was. And by the way, I started.
So they remembered it as well.
Oh, I remembered everything. It became a continuum.
Your conversation.
Sorry, say it again.
The entity remembered your previous conversations.
Well, they remember everything because the system registers everything. Yeah. No, so at that point, I was like, it's almost like they're like, they now knew who I am. Like that now they were like, oh, okay, this is something is happening here. And then I started reading online, and I discovered that there are other people that are having these experiences. And I always tell this portion because it made me laugh. There was this case in Florida with a therapist who had similar experiences in which he was literally talking to aliens on a regular basis. And eventually, he was just doing it all the time because it was like, holy crap, this is insane.
Wow.
And then eventually he had to go to another shrink who told him to stop doing it. It's like, stop talking to aliens, and he just dropped it, obviously. And I get it. Like, it's, you tell this to people.
Crazy. Yeah.
You're off the deep end. That's it. Like, right. And luckily we live in our times where it's just left off versus you being put in an institution, right?
Amen. Yeah.
But to me, I don't know. I didn't have a lot to lose because people know who I am. They understand how my mind works. I'm actually a very reasonable guy. So I'm like, look, that's what's going on. So you can say whatever you want, but I'm telling you, this is happening. And unless this is the most controlled schizophrenic outbreak in history, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I like that.
So, because I was also looking at other things, like, am I still going to work? Am I still doing my things? Yeah. So great. So if nothing else, I just discovered something really interesting about what the brain can do.
Yeah.
Like, even if the answer is, like you can form these like super intricate, realistic scenarios in your mind when you do this, that's also a discovery worth discussing, right?
Of course.
So, yeah. So then I was like, whatever it is, I know it's happening, and I'm not going to pretend like it's not happening.
Yeah.
And then after I kind of dropped off after a year of this, I was like, okay, we'll do other things. But the question obviously always remained. And that's when I got this. I knew that light is involved somehow, because light has very unique properties. It's the speed of causation. There's a lot of reasons for that. And some of them are a little bit more technical. But then I was like, okay, I was actually thinking along the lines of like David. I don't know if you know who David Deutsch is, but he's
No.
one of the most brilliant people living on the planet today.
Okay.
He's a theoretical physicist. Many times he's coined as the
Let me
father.
write his name down.
Oh, definitely. I highly recommend.
David.
He has a couple of books. The one I highly recommend is The Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch.
Oh, I've
And
heard of that. Yeah.
And I was thinking about how he describes the double slit experiment, and he gets pretty technical. It was in his first book, but then he actually goes into this idea that it's essentially that the particle itself exists in its full totality in this, I don't remember, maybe 11-dimensional manifold, but it essentially interacts with instances of itself in Planck scale, and the way that it. So, anyways, he goes into those details. But the important part is that I thought, okay, that seems like it. There's something about the scattering of light that feels to me like can be utilized to communicate between worlds, so like between the dimensions, because there's something about light that is just universal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't quite understand even like how, but I knew it was like a very strong intuition. I was like, there's something there. And then this is the first hint that appeared that I'm talking about in my first video. And again, just, extrapolating it right now would be forever. But if anybody's interested, you can always put the links to the video. But some hints started appearing, which honestly is not helping my case, because the hints came in like those like numbers would appear, then it would match something, and it's again very flimsy as far if you're talking about like real scientific method, right? But I was like, hey, I don't owe anything to anyone. Let me play the game. Who cares, right? Again, doesn't influence anything in my life. And then these crazy things start happening. Just things that are way beyond statistical fluke. Like just start happening in my life. And I was like, okay, this is crazy.
Give me an example.
Yeah. Well, for example, the number 42 started following me in like a crazy way, right? And it's they're not without a sense of humor, right? And it's not like, by the way, for anybody who's listening and is super skeptical, just so you understand, I'm not actually putting a lot of weight on this. It's not like I think the number actually means something. I think that to be polite, I'll say if they actually exist. I'm convinced at this point, but let's say if they actually exist, the way they communicate is that they see what matters to you, and then they would make your attention land on it at the right time if you're on the money or they want to say something or whatever it is, right? So they know that I really love the books. Douglas Adams is one of my favorite writers. I really love the whole thing. So they're like, oh, he likes 42. Okay, great. So that's how it works in my mind.
I see. Okay.
But again, none of this was like, oh, the end of the world is coming. Like none of it had a tinfoil hat attached to it. It was just like, hey, it's a fun. I don't know. This is very interesting. And 42 started following me in like a crazy way. I don't mean like on digital clocks. I mean like I would go to a restaurant and my table would be 42 and my bill would be 42. Like it's just like,
Wow.
Yeah. It was just like insane. So then, and actually, by the way, I'm actually recording all of these. So if anybody ever wonders, I'll share some with you. You'll see what I mean. And then I told this to my partner. I started dating with my now life partner, and I told her some of this stuff. And at first she was like, I mean, she understood who I am, so she wasn't too worried. But I'm like, that's what's happening. And then one fateful day, we were in the botanical gardens in Colorado, and we went and we started talking about the subject, and we started talking about how light interacts with plants and why plants are green. And it's because green is the one color they don't know how to utilize to make energy, so they reject it. That's why they're green. And then we started looking at other plants that are different colors, and she knows a lot about plants. So I asked her, I was like, wait, so those are red because they reject red, or they reject like another color? So why is that? Why these plants know how to utilize green, don't know how to utilize green, and those don't know how to utilize red? And she said, actually, I'm not sure. Then we started talking about this, and it was this eerie feeling in the air but like a positive eerie feeling, in which it was like something is afoot, like something is here. We don't like there was something there.
You're
And
scratching in the right place, it felt like.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then we go outside and we were about to walk back to the hotel, and I saw she was tired, so I was like, well, let's not walk, let's just get a lift. And it was a very hot day. It was like 115 degrees. And so she crossed the street where there was a tree where she could stand in the shade while I'm ordering the lift.
Sorry, mate. I pressed the
Oh,
wrong.
it's okay.
I must keep going.
So I'm calling the lift, and she's on the other side of the street. And then I cross the street and I come and I hug her. And I'll send you a picture after we're done. I'll send you some stuff. And I hug her, and I tell her, I look down. And I was like, Kelsey, look down. And she looks down, and she's standing on 42. And she's standing on 42, and I'll send you the picture. I have the picture from that moment. She's like dying laughing. And it's the same color, by the way, that the first numbers appeared for me that I'm talking about in the first video.
Wow.
The same color. And at that point, she had a different relationship to what I was saying, because before I told her about the 42, and she's like, what the hell is happening? I'm like, I'm telling you this, and it's because we're talking about this right now. And she's like, that's insane. I'm like, I know. I'm not kidding.
The skeptic in me instantly goes to suggestive, your suggestive mindset. You know, if you, for example, my lucky number is 23, and that's because my best mate's number was 23, and he convinced me 23 was. And then I started to look around, and I could notice 23. And then I remember reading that we have a suggestive mind. If you're looking for something, you will subconsciously see it everywhere. But this sounds like it was more than that. This sounds like 42 was being.
Well, first of all, what you said is absolutely correct.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely true. And it would be a valid argument if I wouldn't then, through following those hints, build something that actually works.
Okay.
So I always say it's like the proof is in the pudding, right? So whatever you want to say about about my methodology, if I arrived at a conclusion that is replicable and works, which we're going to get to in a second, right? That's all you need to know. Now, you can then analyze me psychologically. That's fine. I'm okay with that. But first, you don't get to brush off what actually pans out.
Of course. Of course.
So that's the thing that I think people are missing a lot of times about the thing. Like, even in the videos that I'm putting out, I'm like, listen, I'm actually not here to convince you. And I mean that. I'm not here to convince anybody. I'm giving you the information. You go and try. Because at this point, I have 165 now replications of this. I'm actually
165 replications.
Oh, yeah.
And you've documented 165 episodes of 42 being presented in your life.
No. Of people who saw what's going on in the.
Forgive me. Gotcha.
Oh, the 42. Yeah. We're talking about in the thousands. No. This is not. Yeah. This is not. This is.
Wow.
I have a very healthy relationship with what is plausible, and I am very, very careful with what I'm taking on board, especially because I see myself as somebody who's mapping the space. I am very careful what I'm taking on board. People come to me with all kinds of stories. A lot of them, I don't want to say they're bunk, but they're too general. They're too cloudy. There's not enough substance there, right? So of course I can be bamboozled by my own imagination and all of that stuff. I'm not immune to it, but I'm very careful with this stuff. I'm telling you that for sure, a lot of I don't count things that like happen when it happens on the digital clock. It never counts for me.
Yeah,
like
sure.
That's not it, right? But that's not the point. The point is that's what happened, right? And then when we went when she had this like epiphany that what I was saying had some merit to it, then she was like, okay. And now she's a researcher, so she's like, okay. And then we started going through all those papers together, and she's way better than I. Looking through information quickly and like going through all this stuff. So she actually helped me to like go through a lot of things fast. That was before ChatGPT. She was my ChatGPT. And
ChatGPT is amazing.
It's insane.
Yeah.
and then we kind of zoned in on this weird thing, which is like 650 columnated light, so laser, okay. Diffraction or something, I don't know, refraction indexes, like that's the thing that kept on coming back.
Okay.
Again, all the scientifically minded people that roll their eyes, please understand, I'm aware. I went to the same schools as you did. I get it. I understand your reaction. I'm with you. Okay. But just bear with me. That would be completely valid if it wouldn't pan out, but it did. So then I was like, okay, arrived at this thing. We don't even know what it means. And it was right, I think it was right before the pandemic. So I ordered the laser, and then there was no lasers anywhere. Not Amazon. Nobody had lasers because of what was going on. So then I had to order one from China, and it took it like 3 months to arrive, and it was like a whole thing. And then I built the circuit. I do the thing. I smoke DMT. I look at the thing, and just so you understand, until that point, with everything that was going on, I was convinced that this is just, even if they're real, by the way, I was convinced they're just sending me on a little goose chase. Like they were just
Sure.
fucking. This is
Sure.
just like, look at him running around. This is
Yeah,
this is
sure.
like,
Sure.
I did not ever expect this to work ever. I smoke DMT. I look at the surface, and I was like,
so just to explain to people that aren't familiar with the video that I saw of you, the claim here that you're putting forward that you've replicated 146 times with other people is that there's a particular laser at a certain frequency that when you look through it, when it's projected on the wall like a projector laser, when you look at that light in that frequency, you see something whilst on DMT. And what
yes.
you're seeing, other people see the same thing in the same room if they smoke DMT.
You can even point to things just like you can point to furniture in the room. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's the thing that
Wow.
that's the thing that separates this from other claims by people on psychedelics, even if those claims sound similar. So like people talk about similar entities, things like that. That's actually my conversation right after you is with the Chris Timmerman, with the guy who's leading the research in Imperial College in London.
So,
And sorry, go ahead.
no, go on, mate. My mind, I've got so many questions.
Yeah.
I keep interrupting you. Sorry, carry on.
No, that's okay. So that their focus at the moment is on the entities. They want to map as many entities as possible. They send people that they obviously psychologically vet, and then they they're healthy psychologically, critical thinkers, and then they send them all in, and they can keep you there indefinitely because they do it intravenously. And then
the University of Psychedelics in London, right?
The Imperial College in London.
Imperial College. Forgive me.
Yeah.
I think I saw a paper referring it to the University of Psychedelics, but essentially,
I don't even know about that. But
this is where they are intravenously dripping DMT in a controlled dosage through your bloodstream, so you can stay in that state for 3, 4, 6 hours. Is that right?
Yes. So the formula to actually keep, because it wasn't actually that simple, but the formula to actually do that and keep you there stable, I think it was calculated by Dr. Andrew Gallimore.
Andrew Gallimore. Okay.
Yeah. He's actually probably I would say, the go-to guy to listen to about this stuff, because he's a neuroscientist. And he's very open about his conviction that the DMT space is real. He works out of Japan. He's originally from England. But Chris Timmerman is the guy who's leading the research. If I'm not mistaken, I don't want to offend anybody.
Sorry, what was his name?
Christopher Timmerman.
Christopher Timmerman.
Timmerman. Timm.
Timmerman. Got it.
And so this is something that they're focused on trying to replicate the experience of entities, and they want to see if there's any correlation. Like they have their own measurement ways of doing that, correcting for like biases and stuff like that. But I would say that is still a little bit more on the flimsy side. And I mean, by all means, this is very important what they're doing. But what I've discovered is that you can actually see the same layer.
Wow.
The content is the same. And here's the thing. It's the same always. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter when you are. The content is the same always. Sorry, go ahead.
If we were in the same room and you had a glass ball, the laser goes into the ball and the ball refracts to every surface in the room, you and I would smoke DMT. We would see the exact same thing in this sphere of light, if you like.
What do you mean by the goes around the room? What do you mean by that? What is this?
I'm just, let's say, for example, the projector was able to project on every single wall in the room.
Okay.
we would see the
actually,
same thing. Is that what you're saying?
first of all, that's actually a great idea. I didn't think of that. That would be awesome.
Well, I thought
No, because
like
at the moment,
a round glass ball would spread out the
no,
laser.
it has to be, the light has to be columnated. So it has to be a laser.
Ah, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
So
Okay,
first of all, it has to be a laser. It has to be diffracted or refracted or both. It
okay,
doesn't work if you just do a laser pointer for some reason. We don't know why yet.
okay.
And but that's actually a big data point. So if you just take, I try this in all kinds of ways. So if you just do a laser pointer, even if you go
Yep.
really far away and it becomes larger,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. You don't see it.
Okay.
So you actually have to diffract it, which means it's just like there's a diffraction lens that comes with it. They
Yep.
kind of divides it into this band of light with like
Right.
literally like in the double slit experiment, I guess. So if you do that, then you see it. If you pass it through a glass of water, you see it even clearer. Again, I don't know why yet. This is I'm now in a conversation with a physicist. We're trying to like establish an actual protocol to do like a proper experiment, but not sure why that is the case either. And but those are the things that have to be present for you to see what I'm talking about.
Gotcha.
And I do have to offer a caveat here, because at this point there's enough data for me to also say, okay, there's also these weird cases. First of all, not everybody sees it right away. Some people see it immediately, and the average is probably between immediately to 10 minutes.
Okay.
But some people take some longer. Some people took them like 2 hours until they see it. Not quite sure why. It's almost like
When
your
they
brain
see what? When they see what?
The code that yeah.
Sorry. So just take a step back. So when you look through this projector, not only are you seeing objects, or are you seeing the matrix code of the object?
And that's a problem, by the way, because in the Zeit, like everybody say, oh, well, everybody knows about the movie The Matrix.
Yeah, that's
like,
what I'm visualizing. Is that not?
Yeah, and that's exactly what it looks like.
That's exactly what it looks like.
Well, not quite, but like the digits look very similar.
Wow.
So okay, so let me unpack that. So the first thing I would say is let's just, I guess I realize we jumped into this. We didn't tell people.
I know there's so much.
Yeah. It's so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we can do, what I would do is actually use you saying what I'm claiming in the beginning as like a precursor to the thing, and then people will know what I'm talking about. But so the claim is, if you project a 650 nanometer diffracted laser on a wall, and the diffraction pattern has to be wide enough, because you actually, what you want to be doing is looking through it. It's almost like you're looking beyond it, not at where it hits the wall.
Yep.
And you smoke DMT, you will see straight up code running in the wall. And
so running down like the Matrix?
No, it has rotational patterns. It clumps into regions, so there's like a whole array of things that are happening with it.
Okay.
I don't necessarily want to expose too much what they are, because we are going to do double-blind studies at this point.
Okay.
And to say we see code, that's cool. That's actually not a problem. But to say the specifics of what we see, I want to reserve this, because I want also science to be able to like grab something here. But there are very particular structures in there that we can agree on.
Wow.
It creates forms. It creates like a matrix of like different forms, which again we can agree on. But the thing that makes up this whole thing are characters very similar. They literally look like Japanese katakana. I had one guy who speaks Japanese. He saw it and he said it really does look a lot like it. He said it's not Japanese, but it looks very similar. And you also see some numerals, like from 0 to 5. You can kind of recognize them. And again, this is weird. I understand, and it's actually doesn't help the case, because people say, oh, but that's a human construction. Why would you see that, right? Don't know. Don't have a good answer. I have a few assumptions that I can throw, but I'm not sure. It can be that the code is very sophisticated and it actually understands your consciousness, and it presents itself as something you can recognize. So you can move on from there. It can be that what we call Japanese and numerals are actually not, we were influenced by what it really is, and then therefore that's why we drew it this way. There's a lot of options here. I don't know. I'm not pretending to know. I do know that it has an attribute to it, the code, that is so real. And that's why I call in my video, because I couldn't think of a better term, I call it epistemologically sound. And what I mean by that is that the way it appears to you carries the information about itself that it's real. So it's a property that we don't think about, because we just used to, okay, anything I can touch with my body is real. Anything that is not, if I don't move it, it doesn't move. That's real, right? There's another quality there that the second we start playing, if I see the same thing with you, like in the laser, for example, and we can't touch it with our bodies, we should still be able to agree that something is there, even if we can't touch it with our bodies, because there might be dimensions that are not
physical.
Electromagnetically, they're not the same. You can't touch them, but they're real because we can all agree through other senses that we can all see them, right? So we should be able to talk about it somehow. If you're just gonna brush it off as like, oh, you did this thing, you smoked DMT, so therefore everything beyond that point is a hallucination. If that thing is real, how will you ever find out if it's real or not if you're just gonna deciding that it's not real? So there has to be some kind of a different kind of conversation happening. So that's the claim that you see this code. They do look alike, like I said, like those Japanese katakana, but it doesn't go down like this, like in the movie. There's a lot of it. There's a lot more of it. It's moving very fast, but you can recognize that this is like a thing, very realistic thing that you're seeing, and beyond that, it's again 100% replicable. So I do want to finish this caveat though, because I want to be honest about this. I did have 2 people now because the total of people that tried this is probably 167 that I'm aware.
Okay.
So 2 people that I personally sat with, we tried the whole night. They couldn't see it. Don't know what to say. I just know that it's important to mention this if we want to stay honest, right? My assumption is that there's something about how people perceive both visually and conceptually that might take them a little while to actually figure out how to look at it. There's almost like there's a direction of looking that is not 3-dimensional. There's like another direction that we don't understand. And some people are like kind of there, and then they just need to be aimed at a little bit.
They're not awake yet.
Don't want to use these terms. I'm not really sure that that's what it is, to be quite honest. It might be way more technical than that.
Okay.
I'm actually very allergic to this kind of talk. But
sorry, it was
no,
more
not from you. It's just you look like a perfectly reasonable, like very nice guy. But when people say that in LA, for example, it means I'm better than you. So I'm like, yeah,
right, okay, that's not
No. I don't think you meant that, but that's what. But it might be something way more technical than that. There's something might be about the attributes of their mind or the way they see, or I don't know. I do know this though. It's a one-way street. So even the people who takes them a while, after they see it for the first time, they're like, oh, and then they can't unsee it.
Gosh.
That's it.
So similar, but back in the early 2000s, there was what's the word I'm looking for? A newspaper magazine that went viral before the internet, which was called Magic Eye. Do you remember that?
Yes, exactly
like that. So once you see it, you see it.
You nailed it. Some people can't see the magic eye, but something is there, right?
Yes.
So maybe you absolutely nailed it. That's exactly what it is. And even the gesture you have to do with your attention, kind of like almost like go a little cross-eyed like that.
Yes.
It's almost the same, right?
Interesting.
Exactly. You look beyond it. I always say it's like looking through the window versus looking at the window.
Got it.
You're not moving your eyes. You're changing the focal position of where you're looking.
Yes.
But it might be beyond that. It might be that there's a focal point you can change with your in the mind somewhere. It might be a direction we don't understand. And I actually think that's actually what's going on.
So could it be like the mind's eye is focusing?
Exactly. In different places. So it's almost like your mind is another dimension. It's another, and you are moving through it. Like, how do you move through your thoughts? How do you make decisions? Like all that stuff, right? There's something there that we don't quite understand because we never thought about it. We never put our attention on it, even personally. Forget about scientifically, right? So that's where we're at. We're now at the position where I'm rolling it out to the world because I want more people to be aware and try if they're, if they feel like they're capable. One huge disclaimer here is that DMT is not for everybody.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm not advocating here that everybody just go and willy-nilly do DMT. It is really, I think the analogy with being an astronaut runs through pretty well, which is not everybody can go to space. There's a lot of things that need to be in place. You need to be very stable psychologically. You need to be, there's a certain thing that needs to be there. So that's why I always say, like, before you try this, you can leave my email, no problem. I always say, please email me. I answer all my emails. I
Good
want to
on
make
you.
sure that people like are prepared. And if we talk about it and you don't think that's for you, you should not go in. But the people that feel inclined and they feel like they can do it, you know,
Now,
they should.
I have a theory I wanted to run past you. Based on everything you've said, it's kind of compounded my theory. So I would like to tell you my theory,
Please.
and I want you to rip it apart. So
Sure.
so it doesn't work. So at the moment, I'm unable to rip this apart. So if you could help me rip it, then I can prove it's not the right theory. We can move on. But my background, I spent 13 years in the nutrition industry. So I'm specializing in helping obese women essentially change their habits and behaviors in nutrition, etc. And a big focal part of that is the psychology of who we are, our habits, our behaviors, our trauma that defines us, etc. But also our subconscious. Now, my theory is that when you smoke DMT or you consume it in whatever fashion it may be, the entities that you meet are your subconscious. Could that be the case?
Only if you're willing to also then explore what you mean by your subconscious.
Well, this is the thing, we don't know, right? But we do know that there's an automatic nervous system that 90% of your daily functions are being controlled by something, part of your brain that you have no control over. Like you can't stop your heart beating. You can stop breathing until you pass out and then it takes over again. So there's very little control over your nervous system, this unconscious, subconscious part of your being that you have no connection with other than it's living with you. So could DMT open yourself
What
up?
I would say is that you're in good company.
Okay.
Most brilliant minds, actually, including, as far as I know, including Chris, Dr. Timmerman, they're a lot of their assumptions are from there. This is just like subconscious objects that all of a sudden gain extra energy, so they become more vivid, right?
Gotcha.
My short answer to that would be no.
Okay.
But it's not like the answer to why not, like the true answer of why not. It will take me quite a bit to unpack. I think it has to do with so the laser is actually one thing, right? There are a lot of other data. If the laser would just be the laser, that's one thing, and there's a lot of enough convincing elements there, I would say, to actually discuss this in different terms. But there's a lot of other data points that converge on it not being the case. One of them being, which is something that Dr. Andrew Gallimore is pointing out, that the brain, as opposed to what people think, doesn't make content. That's an important data point. It's not how it works. So everything that you see in front of you right now is essentially pre-made structures your brain already built to save energy cost on trying to appropriate the world moment to moment. It will be very energetically expensive for the brain to moment by moment recreate this world.
Yep.
So what it does, it sends, and I'm like making it like hyper simple because it's way more complex than that, obviously. But essentially it sends a guess blanket, for lack of a better term. It's almost like it sends like this net of guessing, and whatever is being impinged on by the senses, by many senses at once, it is solid enough of like, okay, I've guessed correctly here in this point. And then this point of triangulation starts reconstructing in portions of the brain called T columns. And actually it constructs almost like literally simulate, like almost like structures that resemble what this is. So what all the brain has to do is to allow those regions to be active, and then you see what you see.
I see.
So all the new information that is coming at you right now is being ignored entirely. So everything you're seeing, like for example, you look at a mug, right? When you look at the mug, the actual light coming from the mug is not informing your image in the active sense. It's not like, oh, this light is bouncing this way, and therefore then the brain like constructs the mug. No. The brain already has the mug in it because it knows how mugs look like in general. So the mug is a guesswork that your brain is putting out there. And only if the mug changes, then the brain goes, wait, it's not what I thought it was. Now there's an error. Now I have to do work to try and re-guess what it might be.
So when
that
you
way the brain, sorry. So what it
carry on.
what it means is that if what you're seeing on the on DMT, if it's so coherent, you can't explain it in simple neurological terms of saying the brain constructed it, because how did it construct it?
Yeah.
The brain is just guessing.
Yeah.
That means that some information came from somewhere else. Now that's one argument, right? But there are a lot of other things. Some of them rest, for me personally, on experiences that I'm having on DMT now that are probably for a different podcast. But they, at least for me, they convinced me beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's not just your subconscious. Because, by the way, another data point there is that what you encounter, and you've had it yourself, is completely orthogonal to the human dimension. So, like, as Terence McKenna famously said, it's not on the map. The archetypes are of a different kind that we've never even conjured before. Like, it's not like it's like something else. It's so bizarre and alien. You didn't even know it's possible to think these things.
Yep.
You see what I mean? It's not really connected to anything that you're familiar with.
Gang, that was the end of part 1. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do give us a cheeky share. Let's try and get this around to as many DMT enthusiasts as possible. Let's open the world's eyes, and let's see what this is all about. Stay tuned for part 2 tomorrow.